Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Flash, as well as the series premiere of Black Lightning. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can also look in the description down below. I include a time and I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I had to say about this week's episode of The Flash, you can skip to what I had to say about the series premiere of Black Lightning. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of The Flash. Another great episode for The Flash. Obviously, the big focus of this episode is focusing on Barry's trial. And obviously, things did not go the way you would want them to, everyone wanted to. And I love that they're doing this whole situation with Barry. It's like, that's such an interesting situation that none of our superheroes have ever found themselves in. This is like the first time that's ever really happened. Well, I say that, but let's not forget Oliver's literally in the same situation. I mean, he's literally a couple steps behind Barry because there's the whole like, oh yeah, because of the betrayal of Renee, like he ends up like, oh, Agent Watson has what she needs to kind of convict him. So it's like Oliver's kind of pushing that level, but so far they're the only two that have ever really been in that situation. So it's a very unique situation to be in. I don't know if that's ever come up in the comic books like that, but nevertheless, because it sucks so much because it's like we as the audience, like everyone knows, Team Flash knows, and we know it's like you're super innocent. I mean, Cecile's in on the loop and she's defending Barry and she knows he's innocent, but like the entire city is just saying all these terrible things. You're just like, oh my God, you're such a terrible person, Barry Allen. You're a forensic science, but you're taking advantage of the city. You're the most deplorable, most disgusting human being. It's like, oh my God, that sucks so much. But at the same time, it's like there is so much evidence. But I will always use that example of, well, the fact of the matter is, let me some things that should have been clarified. I mean, it's one of those situations that doesn't really help, but I think it would make sense in Barry's case. It's like, he's a forensic scientist, and you're telling me a forensic scientist left all this evidence? Don't you think it's a little suspicious that there's all of this evidence? There's so much super duper evidence. It's like, isn't that a little suspicious? It's just, you know, from an outside perspective, it's kind of like, oh my God, like, shouldn't you find that a little suspicious that there's so much evidence? But at the same time, it's like, no, maybe he's just terrible at his job and maybe his hubris got the best of him and he thought no one would catch him. It's like, you literally found him standing over the body. Like, the question, I mean, because that's the whole thing too. Like, how did you, I guess at the same time, it's like maybe like his wife, Marlise had called the police ahead of time, like, I don't know about my husband, he might be in trouble. It's like, you know, like, how did it, we never got that really explained, like how the police knew to go to Barry's place to find DeVoe, you know? So, or at least that they would go there finding something, you know? So she must have tipped them off like, I'm worried about my husband. Like I said, didn't come up in the episode, but it just sucks because we know Barry's innocent, but at the same time, it's like, you understand where everyone else is coming from because it's like, oh, Barry's just some odd, evil douchebag. It's like, I mean, he's a man that knows kind of like how important life is, because let's not forget that his dad, like, I'm surprised that it come up in trial, but maybe it wouldn't help him. It's like, well, his dad was framed for murder. Like, I think that would be a good point to bring up in trial. Like, oh yeah, his dad was framed for murder. Yeah, it was like a super fast person framed him for murder. Let's not, well, no, I forgot about it. They only know it as Harrison Wells that did it. They don't know about the whole reverse Flash angle, so never mind. But what I thought was really interesting is the fact is everyone's like at least Iris and Cecile, like, yeah, you're gonna have to tell people you're the Flash, and Barry's like, what? I'm not going to do that. She's like, it would help. Honestly, I see both sides to it. Like one side of it being like what Barry ends up bringing up later on, which I thought that was a sick moment. Like Iris is like, I got to tell the court something. Barry Allen is, and he dashes over, he grabs her, and basically, I guess because he's touching her at the same time, she's like, what's going on? And she's like, how are you doing this? He's like, honestly, I don't know either. Just more of the time he's spinning the Speed Force, but he's basically making her move at the same speed he is because he's grabbing onto her. So everyone else is moving slowly, but he's moving her at the same speed that he is so that they can have the conversation. And then what is in literally the matter of a second, they're having that entire conversation. But it's like, if it comes out that he's the Flash, all it's going to do is put a target on his back and their back. Like him and Iris would have to run, but it's not even just them. All of Team Flash, their entire life would be under a microscope. All the bad guys would be coming after them. Hence the point of a secret identity and everything. And ultimately, personally, I think even that's good enough reason, but also at the same time, like, I feel like people will turn that argument against you. It's like, oh, you're the Flash. Of course, no matter if you're a superhero or not, you were going to, that gives you even more motive that you could have done it. But then again, it's like, well, then it turns to that situation, like, well, because he is the Flash, wouldn't that mean he'd be able to cover it up a little bit better? So all it would do is not only tarnish Barry's name, but it would also tarnish the Flash's name too, which sucks. I mean, it does legitimately make you wonder, like the way DeVoe says something later on. He's like, "Oh, there's a 12% chance that you were actually going to tell the people that you were the Flash," and he's like, "No matter what, even if you did, it still would have ended with my victory." So, like, I guess DeVoe has contingency plans upon contingency plans. That's just how he works and everything. But I also think it's just because, like I said, people still would look past him, like, "Oh, so that just means the Flash is a bad guy too." Oh well, lock him up, you know. So I feel like it, like I said, in the grand scheme of things, it would just make things worse, but that's just my opinion. So, but based on what DeVoe says, seems like that it's more so of a fact than anything else, you know. So I don't know. Not unless it would be that he would find another way to gain his victory, even if that didn't work, like I said, contingencies. But major props to his wife Marliese at the funeral, crying up a storm in court, and you see everyone on Team Flash being like, "Oh my God, stop it, you faker!" Even Iris is like, "I'm in the hall during the hallway." It's like, "Okay, no one's around. You can literally stop." She's like, "Yeah, you're right. I should." And it's like, why are you doing this? It's like, for her, it's like whatever plan it is that DeVoe has. It's like, we're doing this for the greater. We're doing this for the sake of the world, essentially. I chalk it up to you trying to feel self-important. You think you're the center of attention. It's like, why are you trying to remove Barry? What has Barry done? He's done nothing but do good. But you know, DeVoe's in such a mindset where he thinks like, oh, I got to elevate humanity and stuff like that, bringing humanity to the next level, basically revolutionize the world and make the world a more enlightened place. It seems like we still don't 100% know what that entails, but it does seem like, I would assume that's kind of like the long plan here, but whatever it is, Marliese is 100% by his side. And because I had a feeling she was going to try and push Iris, because she was like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing all this for my husband. Oh, what wouldn't you do for your husband? Like, won't you go, you know, to hell and back for them, essentially?" So I was wondering, like, it seemed like she was trying to manipulate Iris into doing something, and I guess that was this, but I guess they would just wanted to see what would happen. Kind of just sit back and watch their work, you know, like the whole thing play out, you know. What's also crazy in this episode is the fact that you had like even Joe being willing to like cross the line and plant evidence against Marliese, but Ralph kind of talked him out of it, and we kind of got, it's kind of actually sad when because Ralph was using himself as an example, because it's like, oh, you think you're doing the right thing, but at the same time, like later on down the road, when it's all said and done, when you've lost the people that are important to you, when you've lost your honor, and eventually it all turns on you and turns into self-pity, you'll realize, no, you weren't right. You were wrong from the beginning. Then you lose touch with your family. You're treated like you're not even born. We're never even born. I'm like, gosh, that's rough, dude. Who knew Ralph had it that rough? I mean, Ralph is like, no, the whole disgraced cop angle, but like hearing it from him like that, because we haven't really seen it brought up in the show about the whole like him being a disgraced cop thing. But it was kind of interesting to hear that from him. You kind of get that perspective of like, things are kind of, you know, even though Ralph is the way he is, kind of like all smiles and laugh, like he's got kind of a heavy burden of his own to kind of deal with just the way his life has kind of turned out, you know. And it's a thing where, like, you know, in the past he's kind of still kind of blamed Barry a little bit, but it's still a situation where it's like, now that he's gotten to where he is now, being the hero that he is now, you know, still a hero with issues, but still a hero nonetheless. He's come to realize, like, you know, I did the wrong thing. Like, he's always probably recognized that he just didn't want to admit it to himself, you know, so. But that was kind of good that he was able to pull Joe back from that. It's like, yeah, it would have been nice. It would have felt good to take the small victory. Once again, you don't know what contingency plans are in place. Eventually, you would have gotten caught, you know, if not for, you know, DeVoe catching you or whatever, or just something, like you would have eventually got caught, or the tables would have been turned on you. So it's a good thing. And besides, you would basically undermine everything Barry's trying to do right now, trying to make things honorable, because he's like, I can't get on the stand and talk because that would involve me lying. That's just going to be me perjuring myself, and it's just going to make matters worse. He's like, if I lie, I'm just going to be the person that they already think I am. So it's like, you know, it's like Barry's being the honorable person, like, because even, you know, it's like, yeah, no sell. Like, it's something I brought up last episode, and kind of the whole, like, oh, yeah, don't run situation. It's like, they're like, yeah, there ain't no prison that can actually hold you. It's like, I will serve my time. It's like, because I'm not going to run, you know? So, some other interesting things about this episode. I love the fact is the whole conversation about when they're dealing with the fallout, well, that's his name, when they're dealing with that meta, the whole aspect of like, oh yeah, we need Frost to cool him down. It's like, well, how do, you know, go ahead. And then like you have Caitlin be like, I can't just snap my fingers and get it done. Be a lot simpler if that was the case. I wonder, is that going to be something like she'll eventually be able to do, just to kind of transform on command? She's like, I have to be scared or angry. And they terrify her a little bit and kind of yell at her to get her transformed. Um, That, and also there's a big thing that came up in this episode that I was wondering if there was, like, it's something I've brought up before that maybe they're going to circle back around to it. It's the stuff from Barry's head, like everything he was mumbling, all that quote unquote gibberish and all the symbols and stuff like that, all the stuff he wrote down when he came out of the Speed Force. I felt like that had to have something to do with DeVoe, but now I'm like, it's never really gotten back to since like the first episode. They haven't really tackled it since then. But this episode kind of points out something. It's like, oh, when he was talking gibberish, quote unquote gibberish, he was like, I'm innocent, Your Honor. It's like, at that moment, I was like, wait, what? And now it's like sinking in. It's like, that meant like Barry, whatever his situation was, he was basically experiencing all of time at once, I'm thinking, where he was at in the Speed Force. Because Speed Force seems like it kind of coincides with all of time and like also exists outside of time, but maybe it exists with every aspect of time. So maybe when Barry was in that, whatever he was in, maybe he was in like some great library of time where he knew history and stuff like that. So what he was referencing back then was his current predicament. So all that stuff he was speaking wasn't gibberish. For him, his brain was like compensating for the fact that it was full of all this knowledge. Maybe it's the knowledge of the past and the future, maybe specifically the future, maybe at whatever happened to him, Barry ended up absorbing all of time. Because Barry also has a very distinct mind too, because of the fact is because of his abilities, he can like obtain knowledge very quickly. So who's to say like that entire like 6 months he was gone, like he wasn't just absorbing knowledge, and that included history and stuff like that. And so that's what that's all about. Like literally all of time is written in those. Like I said, I don't know whether that's counting the past. I assume it is too, because I feel like with the Speed Force situation, all of time basically happens all at once. So I could be wrong about that, but that could be a key component to what DeVoe wants. Basically to enlighten things. Maybe it involves him trying to do some time travel of his own and basically messing with history. Barry knows better than anyone about that, so maybe that's one reason why he wants Barry removed from that, because the only person that he knows of that could challenge him when it comes to like maybe rewriting history and changing humanity forever is Barry, because him being a speedster. So I don't know. Like I said, I'm very curious to find out more about that, because they set that up like that to be like, oh yeah, like we're finally like piecing that together, like why that was so important. Like, maybe that's. I mean, the question is also like, what were the metahumans for? Were the metahumans just a distraction? I mean, obviously he got something out of being Dominic and having Dominic, because now he has Dominic's body, can hold his mind because of his ability without it having, the negative effects it told on his other body, because Dominic's mind is more a calibrated tool of his telepathic abilities. And now on top of that, he has a telepathy too, so making him twice as dangerous and twice as hard to take down just because of that. So also, like, interesting enough, I like that angle that they were going to prove. They're like, oh yeah, look at Dominic and Marlise making out. Oh, you're the one that set your husband up to get murdered. And it's like, no, he knew that, there was just some aspects of our life he couldn't fulfill anymore. And he wanted my happiness. I'm like, oh God, you made me sick. You twisting this around like that, trying to make it, it's just like, it's like you hate them so much because of what they're doing. It's like, you guys are such terrible people and you're getting away with this, it sucks. I mean, especially at the end of the episode, like I brought up earlier, like Barry's getting chewed out in court, by the judge, of like how disgusting and deplorable he is, and at the same time Singh is awarding him and everything. I did appreciate Singh try to stick up for him, like, oh, Barry Allen is a good man. He Barry wanted to not just put away the bad guys, but also prove people's innocent, and it's like, oh, that's something Singh wanted to bring to Central City, that Central City will be a little better off without it. I mean, better off with it, but it's like, the judge, prosecutor Slater was kind of like, oh yeah, the fact is he's been going for 6 months. You didn't really know about that, did you? It's like, well, I didn't really sign off on it. It's like, yeah. How about the whole fact is that he's been late like 72 times or something like that. Which is always the irony behind that, like Barry being late and being the fastest man alive, but nevertheless. And it's just like twisting everything against him like that, and it sucks. It's in a messed up way. It's almost a repeat of the beginning too. Like they had to deal with those 6 months without Barry between season 3 and 4. It's a little bit easier on Iris. Not that the whole situation's easy, but it's easier because at least he's here. He might be locked away, but he's here. Like not in a situation where it's like I don't know if he's ever coming back or not, or he's lost forever type of thing. So I also thought it was kind of interesting that the cell he ends up getting locked up in at the end is his dad's cell, which that the person, one of the cops that was there was like, get comfortable. It's like, was that on purpose? Was that because they knew about that? Maybe Joe set that whole thing up, to just something there to give him strength, because it's like his dad went through this exact same thing and his dad never completely broke down. His dad kept strong for his sake. And so Barry's going to use that as his strength. And Iris is going to use Barry as her strength, to try and get, through all of this. So, like, overall, a great episode, a great episode to bring the flashback on with all of this, because it's just like the city's going to be without the Flash for a while because of this. So, I mean, Team Flash is going to do their best to stop Dominic, or rather, DeVoe, but it's like, how do you stop him when he's so far ahead of you with just the way his abilities naturally work? Plus, he's got telepathy on top of that. You're down Barry, so the team's gonna have to work without him to handle this situation. Like, you still don't even have a clear-cut picture of what you're up against, like what he's aiming for, So I'm very interested to see what goes down in the next episode with the continuation of this, especially like Barry's locked up in prison and everything. He could defend himself by using his powers, but he's probably just going to keep that low key, because I'm sure because these aren't the cells that metahumans are locked up in, because there's that whole, so the last thing he wants to do is show off people what he can do, because he could hide that, I'm sure, but, being as fast as he is, but I'm sure it's just going to be a situation of, like, he doesn't want to kind of expose himself, so he probably won't use his abilities at all, so. And also him being a cop, too, even though he's not a cop, he's still, like, a forensic scientist, but still kind of associated as a cop, it's still not going to be any easier for him. It's going to get actually worse in there for him because of that, so. I'm curious to see how this whole situation gets resolved. Barry made a declaration of, like, we will find a way to stop you. And it's like, I don't see how you're going to find a way out of this, Barry. We will just have to wait and see. Also, I was really quickly checking my notes. There are two more things I want to add at the end here. I thought was just kind of interesting that I felt like also noting. One, finding out that Earth 15 is dead. That was kind of interesting. It makes you wonder what that whole story is about, but probably something we'll never get to learn about. Probably just like, just one of those things. And also, Tracy was brought up in this episode. We have not seen Tracy subsequently since season 3's finale, but it was kind of interesting because they were like, oh yeah, basically they were going to have Fallout checked by her to see if if he really was one of the metas from the bus or whatever. Because we still have a lot of them whose identity we still don't know at this point in time. And so I just thought that was kind of interesting too, because it's like, oh yeah, so she is still around. There's always the possibility that she might just pop up in the show. Basically saying that she's not like completely gone from the story, that the fact of the matter is she still can pop up since they're referencing her like that and everything. I don't know, like I said, those just some extra stuff I just want to kind of comment on at the end as well, so. And now moving on to the series premiere of Black Lightning. A great series premiere. I think this episode already started off things very interesting. Immediately, you automatically have a lot of questions, but at the same time, I feel like immediately in this episode, they already set the tone. Even from the previews and trailers, I had a very nice feeling of like, this show is like a blend of Arrow meets The Flash. And like, just because it's kind of got like that vigilante feel, and it's something to even tackle in the show. It's kind of like, okay, what's the difference between Black Lightning and other people running around, being superheroes and stuff like that, which is kind of like the whole conversation I brought up before. It's like, well, what's the big difference between Oliver and Barry, with the fact of the matter is of like one being a superhero, one being a vigilante, that whole situation. I guess it's just in the sense of how he handles things. I do like the fact that this does have like that Arrow feel of like, don't expect things to just kind of be handled like, oh, like people are, and there's like one guy that he used as a human shield in this episode. So I was like, so I guess we can expect stuff like that. Also, there was like one point where Tobias put like some dude in a tank and it looked like a bunch of like piranha fish started biting on him or something. I assumed they're piranhas, but it might have just been some other type of fish. We're just eating his flesh and stuff like that. Dude was still alive and everything too, so. But I mean, even aside from all that, I really appreciate the premise behind it too. Like, being the fact is that Black Lightning was a superhero that was around for a while and then just up and disappeared. I even like the picture, like the wanted picture at the police station of him is like obviously a comic book rendition, like the comic book version of the character, just like not colored in and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of a nice touch. But the fact is that he was a hero for a while and he had to call it quits. We ended up finding out more about that with the episode going by, finding out that basically Jefferson, and I might just call him Jeff just because of the whole like Jackson, him being Jefferson. So I don't know. I don't know. It depends on how I decide to go from it. But I'm stumbling on my words. I do apologize. I'm getting too ahead of myself. Jeff and Lynn ended up getting separated. Now the question is, we see it specifically because she found him in a bathtub bleeding and is like, I can't do this. This is too much. The question is this because she always knew about it, but she was kind of okay with it because it's like, oh, he's doing good. And it just sank in that it got too real. It's like, oh my God, like you could really die from this. Or is it a situation of that was the moment she found out everything, So that begs the question too. Because if that is a question, like, because once again, I'm also curious about like what particular Earth this takes place on. Does this take place on Earth 1? Like, they're not something that I'm sure they're going to really expressly bring up. Because the fact of the matter is, like, Black Lightning is a metahuman. They haven't brought it up in this episode. Like, and once again, it's like the beginning of the show, so they're not really going to tap into it. But obviously, that later parts of the episode kind of showed that his daughter is kind of, like, at least one in particular. But I think even the trailers kind of showed that both of his daughters had the potential of it, just because like that metahuman gene kind of passes down. But it's kind of interesting because his oldest daughter, Nissa, her seemed more like super strength, but to be fair, that might just be like, well, the fact of the matter is Black Lightning is kind of super strong because he adds kind of electricity to his. So maybe like, I guess from a scientific perspective, maybe like electricity flows through your veins and kind of tightens up your muscles, allowing you to push them a little further. Maybe that could be like the science explanation. Because we see a natural charge. We saw her hands kind of glowing up a little and she broke the same. So either like her power is something else entirely, which does it work like that? I mean, truth be told, I'm basing this around like an example like Barry, because he has a grandson, Bart, who's a speedster. But then once again, it's like, well, that's the whole Speed Force situation too. I think I actually brought this up specifically when I was talking about Black Lightning when their trailers were originally dropped. I was like, does it work like that? Because the Speed Force is kind of its own thing. So just because you're a speedster doesn't guarantee that your children will be a speedster. Because I don't even know anything about Barry and Iris's son, who is Bart's, Impulse's, dad. So I don't know anything about that. So it's his, is Barry's son, Impulse's father, speedster as well, or did the metahuman gene just skip over him? And it's just kind of, like I said, it seems like speedsters are kind of their own thing. But nevertheless, I'm going all over the place, so I do apologize. That's kind of a rough situation. It's like, you understand where Lynn's coming from, where it's like, okay, we can't be together and everything, just because it's like, I mean, there seemed like there were two different instances. It seemed like I thought they were the one same instance, but it seemed like it was two separate ones where it's kind of like, she's like, promise me you're not going to do this ever again. And he was like, okay. So I think that was probably the first time. And then later on, she's like, I can't keep doing this. I want a divorce. So I guess that was like her finding out like, oh, he said he was going to quit, but he didn't. It wasn't probably until like the divorce happened that he finally like, no, I'm going to quit, just because he wanted to get his family back together. He still got his girls. I'm assuming it's kind of set up where they live with him most of the time, if not all the time. But it seems like Lynn lives somewhere else. But where do I know her from? The actress who plays Lynn. I can't remember quite what it was, but I feel like I've seen her in something and she had a British accent. But nevertheless, it also seems like Nissa might be, she was old enough at that point in time to kind of recognize something was up, but she probably didn't really know. So none of them really know. I mean, Nissa and Jennifer did see his face mostly. I think it's still kind of that Clark Kent thing of like, well, you're covering up some of your face, but there's still that aspect of most of your face is exposed, so they'd be able to tell. So I don't know. Or maybe they were just like, holy crap, Black Lightning's in front of us. I don't think it really correlated in their head. Like, our dad's Black Lightning. I do appreciate the fact, too, is that Jefferson is kind of a principal on multiple levels of just kind of like, I don't know, because it's always interesting when you compare to superheroes. It's like, well, what is Oliver? Well, Oliver's a former billionaire playboy turned mayor. You have Kara being a reporter. You have Barry being a forensic scientist. You have the Legends, being Legends. But there was that point in time that, Sarah had like I guess what would be considered a 9-to-5 job. And now you have Jefferson being a principle, and that's just kind of interesting. Like going back to this area really quickly, that 9 to 5 doesn't really count because they're being superheroes 24/7 with the whole time travel and everything. But nevertheless, it's kind of nice. And when we actually break it down, it's like all their jobs are kind of about, it's kind of similar jobs in the sense of like, well, helping a community, especially Oliver and Jefferson. You could definitely see the comparisons there. Both wanting to make the community, their cities and their communities a lot better, because Freeland is not a very good place. Even from the very beginning, just like the whole like them getting pulled over and everything. It's like, oh, these are the ones who, oh, well, you can go now because apparently you're not the ones that robbed this lady's liquor store. And it's like, you're just gonna really? And which, like, it just seems so interesting to me. Like it played out like that. It's like, I don't know, like, you really care that much about a liquor store, like, robbery to go to that extent like that? That was just, I don't know, that just drew my attention. Like, that was a little, I mean, well, I guess that's kind of the whole point, to be like, well, it's kind of shady. So, what I also like, too, is about the whole, like, vigilante aspect is the fact is that, I would assume is going to be, essentially Black Lightning's, Commissioner Gordon is, Inspector, Henderson. Apparently, they've had bad blood when they've crossed paths in the past. Obviously, it's going to be that weird situation where it's like, well, he's good friends. Like, Jeff and Henderson are good friends, too. So they have a past, apparently. But now it's like, oh, they're also adversaries in that regard, too. So it is just kind of sad, that situation of like, he tried to pull away from that life because he wanted to make sure he built a nice community, trying the best he could, because, you know, and he brought up a good point that I always, you know, it's something I've talked about recently, too. It's like the whole superhero thing. It's like, yeah, being a superhero is fine and dandy, but there's no end to it. There's always going to be something. There's always going to be someone else, new evil sprouting up. It's a 24/7 job, you know, not really that much time to really relax, you know, if you know, keep that up. It's interesting too, because for him, it's like the reason why he became Black Lightning in the first place was to avenge his dad, who was killed by Tobias. And the way he talks about it is like, my dad's articles shoved down his throat. So it sounds like his dad was kind of a reporter himself. But then it was like, you know, it spread to like giving hope and fighting for everyone. So, but once again, it's like a never-ending fight, and he just couldn't do that anymore, especially because it was costing him his family. So, but I also like the fact is that he is kind of like I said, he's very much like comparing what's already established, is that he's very much like Oliver, but he does, like, unlike Oliver, it seems like he is not just 100% stoic. He does seem like he does have his sense of humor, because it's like, oh, come on, you're going to shoot me, but, you know, at least give me time to say something heroic. Now you just pissed me off. I also like the way his power works too. Like, it also seems like he is fairly fast, but maybe it's just because it was in the darkness. But those at that club at the near the beginning, they couldn't see him. So I was like, oh, is he moving super fast or something? It's like, no, he's moving pretty, I guess, averagely fast, but it's because it's in the dark and they're like kind of throwing off balance and everything. But I like the fact is because when he like lightnings up his punches and stuff like that, it leaves a sizzle on their body. Like you can see like steam coming off their bodies from it. So I thought that was pretty neat. And I mean, he's actually pretty good at like hand-to-hand combat too, like up close and personal. Plus the whole metahuman abilities aspect does make it so it is like, you know, like I said, adds more oomph to his hits. What's also kind of interesting too, it seems like his powers are what charge his suit, because it seems like the moment he kind of lets his power die down, like the suit kind of stopped lighting up. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I appreciate that and what I also appreciate too is because this is already established hero, he already has an established team of sorts. He has a Gambi, but that's about it. Which it seems like that whole setup's at the back of a like tailor shop, which is kind of like, that's a very unique headquarters. Like everyone else has got like these huge bases, and he's, you know, because that was kind of something they've already established about the show. It's like he's not really going to have a team. He's going to be working on this alone. Obviously, his daughters are going to be developing their powers, but I'm sure he's going to be like, nah, stay out of this. But eventually, they'll probably be like, no, we're in this, you know, together with you. So it might turn into that situation. But for now, it seems like it is something he is going to solo himself. It's also because it's that interesting thing too, because it does seem like Jefferson does his best to try to do what he can without using his abilities. Because you could make the argument that he makes compromises, because it's like, okay, we have this deal, like, you guys, I won't get the police involved because I don't want, you know, a war between the 100 gang and the police, and that's going to turn into a bloody situation. So it's like, hey, you keep your people off of my school grounds, like, you know, Garfield being off limits. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting touch. Just because it's just so interesting that he would do that, but at the same time it's like, well, no, he's just trying to make the best of a terrible situation without having to go to the extent of using his powers. Which I also like the fact is of how his powers work too. It isn't just a situation of he summons electricity, he affects other electricity too. Because when you start getting pissed at the beginning, and you see it throughout the episode too, like anytime like his emotions kind of flare up a little bit, like you see like lights start to flicker because I guess like he's sucking out the electricity. Like when even naturally when he's getting mad, he's naturally drawing in the electricity from nearby sources. I guess that's what that's kind of supposed to be, or maybe he's throwing the electromagnetism out of whack. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I don't even understand science fiction, so I'm not going to pretend like I can understand this and break it down like that. So. I think this episode also did a very good job of setting up his daughters, like Anissa being like the older daughter who's kind of like the perfect one. She's got medical training and stuff like that. And we can also see like the way she took Will down at that point in the episode. Like she punched him and then like flipped him, and it's like, so she's pretty like awesome all around. And Jennifer's kind of supposed to be like the wild card. She's the young one that kind of has to get caught up in her family's shadow. Her dad's the principal, her sister's there at the school and just kind of like Miss Perfect and everything. And it's just like, it's a legacy. She feels, most likely like, how can I live up to that? You guys are so perfect, and like I'm supposed to be that. That's a lot of pressure. Just like, why can't I just be me? Why can't I just have fun? Why do I have to live up to these expectations that you and everyone else has of me, I'm just curious to see how this family dynamic changes going forward, because family it's a dynamic that none of our superheroes have had to deal with, like in a big way, in his sense of like, well, he has an ex-wife, he has kids. I mean, he has the whole like, beyond that, we don't even know about his own mom situation. Once again, this is a lot of stuff, from the very beginning, but it's like, I mean, every hero has their own tragic situation. Oliver doesn't have his parents. Carr doesn't have her biological family. Barry's lost both his parents. Legends are kind of in the middle on that, because some are lost, others are just kind of like we don't know anything about, so there's that. So I don't know. And another quick thing I find interesting about Jefferson too is it seems like maybe when he uses his powers, he kind of loses a little bit of control, because it seemed like his powers might do something to him, because at the point where he attacked those cops early on when they try to use those like taser/stun gun things on him, it's like, yeah, that's going to be shooting electricity into him, which he kind of feeds off of. But he knocked them out and then he blew up the car. I was like, aren't you a little worried though? They've seen your face, but they're kind of racist, so it's just like, you're just going to be some random black guy to them. So it's like, it's not like they could give a real description. It's like, oh, you're just some random black guy. That's really all they have to go on. So I guess that's no concern in that regard. But there are moments where he just kind of like, there was that guy stepping out of his hotel room and then like he just zaps him, and it's almost like, it seems like you kind of get a little indiscriminate when you're pissed off, and like I think power just kind of floods him, and he just kind of, it almost feels like adrenaline. Because at first I was also wondering, I was like, oh, like does he have like a rapid healing factor too, like Barry or something? But it's like, no, because like he had that gunshot wound, so he's very much flesh and blood. He just has the added potential, like, oh, I can shoot electricity, I would assume gather. I like the whole, like, it almost kind of reminded me of, like, a Kamehameha wave when he was about to do it. The way he was, like, swinging, like, turning his arms and then, like, shooting the electricity like that. Kamehameha wave, deep from Dragon Ball, just kind of immediately went to my mind, so. I also appreciate the aesthetic of the fact is that who he was back in the day, like before he quit, like the whole shaved head, no facial hair, that is more central to like the character's typical design, which I thought was kind of interesting. But now this is him older, he just lets his facial hair grow out and he's kept his hair. So I thought that was kind of a nice touch. Also, like the fact is he was wearing the original costume, but it's like, nope, he's got a more high-tech get up. I'm curious. I'm very curious going forward to also find out about how he's known Gambi and like how that whole situation came to be. Because it seems like is definitely the only one who knows the truth about Jeff and this whole situation. But also to be able to do what he does, like he had to work for some huge tech company or something to be able to build what he built. With that suit and everything. So. And he's always been waiting for this moment, because the fact is, he's like, oh, I've been working on something new this entire time. Also seems like Jeff's also got a voice changer too with that whole like get up. Like it seems like he can modify the goggles so that they're kind of more shadish, so that it blocks his eyes more. I don't know. Like I said, overall, like very great premiere. Just a lot of interesting touches and a lot of interesting things we're immediately kind of getting thrown into the deep end on. And I'm very interested to see how this all plays out going forward. I'm very interested to check out the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.